Okay, I'm going to hit broadcast now. You're good to go.
Great. Good evening and welcome everyone to this May 26, 2020 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using in response to Governor Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives order. This format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping its members, staff, and the public safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. Looking ahead, tonight's regular meeting will include a public forum. Information about how to participate in this meeting is available also on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And as always, other avenues of communication with me and city councilors are available, including email and voicemail. And thank you again for joining us. And so actually, with that, I am closing the city council meeting and opening the meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency. Our first item of business, a main item of business, is the downtown Riverfront development, Williams and Dame Associates terms. And I assume manager?
I'm here. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I hope you all had a good Memorial Day holiday. It's good to see you back again. Denny's going to actually introduce this item and then turn it back over to Mike Kinnison. So I'm just going to let him go.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. This is Denny Bro, Planning and Development Department. We're here again this week to talk about our Riverfront redevelopment project. We were, as you recall, at council last week, and at that point you were looking at a supplemental budget item that would that you approved that will allow us to move forward with the first phase of infrastructure on the Riverfront project. And at that time, we also talked about the importance of the Williams and Dame development and keeping it moving forward as the park is moving forward and as the infrastructure work begins. So this evening, you are considering updated deal points that, if approved, will keep Williams and Dame on a path. And that's a path that we've been on for a couple of years now with Williams and Dame. And as we mentioned last week, both the city and Williams and Dame have made significant investments to date. And what these updated deal points will do is provide both certainty and some flexibility, so both of us, Williams and Dame and the city, can work together to bring the best possible project forward. And it's important to recognize as we go into this that this flexibility is basically within the two concept plans that council has previously approved. And Williams and Dame's interest, and I think our interest as well, is to have some flexibility within the terms, really to maximize what can be built given the market conditions at the time, investor interest and opportunities that may come forward in the future, and other considerations such as the BOLI determination that we talked about in the past, all of which will need to continue to navigate following the signing of an updated development agreement. So although there are some contingencies that will still need to be met before we close on the sale of the property, getting an updated development agreement with Williams and Dame signed is a critical next step for this project. So I'm going to ask Mike Kinnison to kind of walk you through deal points that we're asking you to consider this evening, and then we can answer questions.
Hi, Mayor and City Council. This is Mike Kinnison, a Community Development Director, and I'm going to share my screen with you and go through a presentation. Can everybody see that? Okay. Well, today's work session, we're really picking up from last September when we revisited some of the terms with Williams and Dame. This project continues to evolve as new conditions arise, which is not atypical in complicated real estate developments. What is important is that we continue to have forward momentum and recognize that Williams and Dame is significantly invested in the project, remains committed as ever, and we're moving closer and closer to finalizing a deal. Several factors have led to our need to consider some additional modifications and flexibility, including changes in how we're going to fund the infrastructure, information we've received from BOLI, potential legislative changes to opportunity zones. And of course, we've got a pandemic going on now that's inserted a level of uncertainty that no one could have anticipated just a few months ago. So having flexibility as to what can be built in this environment will help us ensure we can get to a best possible outcome with a vision consistent with the Riverfront Master Plan. So today we're going to start with just a little bit of a refresher, a recap of how the concept plan has evolved over time. We're going to walk through a number of proposed term modifications. We're going to touch on the need for right-of-way dedication in the riverfront, and then we'll review a recommended motion that's available to take action on those term modifications and the right-of-way dedication. This image contains the concept plan that was approved in 2018 on the left. And then on 2019, I think September of 2019, Williams and Dame proposed changes to the concept plan. And that is shown there on 2019, or on the right, the 2019 plan. The 2019 plan allowed more density and commercial square footage on the riverfront. If you recall, it combined lots 9A and 9B and 10A and 10B into larger parcels on the riverfront that would allow for more dense projects to be developed there. It also relocated the potential hotel from parcel 7 to block 3 over here. And the same for affordable housing from 10A also to block 3. The first term to consider involves establishing a minimum and maximum level of development that could occur in the riverfront. It works within the previously approved concepts from the 2018 plan and the 2019 plan. Those concepts would essentially serve as bookends as to what could be ultimately developed. What you're looking at here is a table that is on the second page of your attachment A. It provides a minimum and maximum for the number of units, square footage of retail, and the type of parking that could be provided. On the left, the column, that is a summary of each parcel and what could be developed per the 2018 approval. And on the right is the maximum that could be built per the 2019 approved concept plan. Let's take a little closer look at that table. This is for parcel 3A. And on the left there, you can see a summary of what could potentially be built under a minimum scenario, and on the right under a maximum scenario. And it relates to the number of units that could be built, how much square footage would be developed, and the type of parking that would be provided. At one end, you could have 3 to 4 story buildings served by tuck under and surface parking with at least 375 units of housing and about 9,000 square foot of retail. And on the other end, from 4 to 7 story buildings with structured parking and over 1,200 residential units with twice as much retail. Our interests remain aligned with Williams and Dame in terms of the desire to bring forward a high quality riverfront development that provides as many housing and commercial opportunities as possible, one that helps us achieve many of our policy goals around density, transportation, and climate. However, we don't know what the future holds, and this proposed modification provides flexibility to bring forward the best possible outcome at the time development occurs. It's important to note that the quality of what will be built remains unchanged under these different development scenarios. And in fact, the city manager acting as the agency director retains the right to approve final designs for what is eventually developed. The next term relates to affordable housing, and there's 2 components to this. The first is who would actually build the affordable housing. We now believe that coordinating this project with our local affordable housing providers, pipelines, and the local and state resources available may provide to be a better path to moving this project forward in a timely way. The current term has us selling to Williams and Dame to build that project. What is being under consideration tonight is to actually go back to what the original term said, and that is to sell to Williams and Dame or another affordable housing provider to build that project. This change doesn't preclude us from working with Williams and Dame and a developer of their choosing, but it simply gives us more options. And I just want to note that we received a question about how MUPTI would be treated in the instance of Williams and Dame building the affordable housing, or if the lot was sold to a local provider and they build the affordable housing. And as you know, the moderate income contribution can be met by providing units or paying the fee with MUPTI. The MUPTI ordinance allows for the qualifying units to be located in the MUPTI project or anywhere within a master planned area like the Riverfront development. The units can be developed by the MUPTI project owner or by somebody else, so long as the units are substantially under construction by the time the fee would be due. So this change would not affect the availability of MUPTI on the Riverfront. The next term related to affordable housing deals with location. And this proposed term provides some options and flexibility to consider other locations in the vicinity of Block 3 for that project. The current term locates it on Block 3. What is being proposed is to either be able to develop that project on Lot 3C on Block 3, 3B, or north of 4th Avenue at Lot 2, or potentially in Lot 1 if the area in the dashed area you see on your screen, if that area were to be come under control of Williams and Dame so that a lot of equal size could be developed there, then Lot 1 could also be considered for this project. We checked in with a local affordable housing provider to get their perspective on this term and on the different options of where it might be built. And what we heard was that all these options appear to be equally favorable locations for affordable housing. What is more important to them is that there's sufficient lot size and the zoning allows the use. And all the potential locations being considered here are of similar size and zoned appropriately. Having the flexibility as to where to locate the project in this area also provides an opportunity to design Block 3 more efficiently with shared central services and parking for the potential private developments on that block. The next term deals with infrastructure and purchase price. This term modification provides another way to recover the private share of infrastructure costs, but does not change the total amount to be paid for the infrastructure and sale of the property. That amount remains the same. The current term has Williams and Dame's share, which is 50% of the infrastructure cost paid through a local improvement district. What is being proposed is that Williams and Dame's share of the infrastructure would be paid through the sale of the property. The current term has the purchase price of $7.95 per square foot. And what is being proposed is that Williams and Dame would pay either the higher of the $7.95 per square foot plus 50% of the infrastructure costs added to the purchase price, or the fair market value of the property that will be based on an appraisal. Another important point to consider is that the proposed term would actually have the infrastructure costs being recovered sooner as we sell the property than we would with a local improvement district assessment process that would take place over a number of years. The final term to consider involves sidewalks. This term modification results in a savings for the agency in the amount of $850,000. The current term has the sidewalks being constructed by adjacent property owners. The proposed term doesn't change that, that remains the same. The current term has the agency, though, paying for the additional costs for upgraded sidewalks in the riverfront. So the riverfront, the code requires a more robust sidewalk and right-of-way there, which has additional cost to it. The proposed term would have the adjacent property owners being responsible for those costs of the upgraded sidewalk. So that's where the savings comes in. The River Guides met in April and unanimously recommended support for the proposed modifications in Attachment A and that were just reviewed. And then we left some space to talk about natural gas, since some councilors recently indicated an interest in possibly restricting whether and how natural gas could be used in the downtown riverfront. As you know, council has been having policy level discussions about possible limitations on the use of natural gas across the city. Once that policy is decided, it would apply to the downtown riverfront just like it would in other areas of the city. However, if council wants to add natural gas specific language to the term sheet, we've included language for an option to do that in the AIS and have a draft motion to consider. This option would provide council more time to address the issue in a citywide context while retaining an opportunity to regulate gas use in the riverfront if desired. The language for consideration would add a condition of closing that would not allow the lots in the downtown riverfront to change hands until the council adopted a citywide policy. If that policy discussion appeared like it was going to slow down the development, council, acting as the agency board, could then determine a specific set of requirements that would apply in the riverfront, with those requirements guided by what the council had learned as it worked on the citywide policy. Okay, we have a phased infrastructure project in the riverfront that's indicated there. In yellow is the first phase, and in purple our second phase. Currently, the agency owns all the property in the riverfront, and as right-of-way, the city owns the right-of-way, and so we need to go through a dedication so that the city owns that property. And we have in the today's motion would allow you to take that action. So next steps, pending the outcome of today's discussion, we'd sign a new DDA consistent with the new terms with Williams and Dame, and hope to do that by mid-June. Shortly after that, we will submit for a new BOLI determination. Williams and Dame would continue with their period of due diligence. Our phase one infrastructure is beginning in June with a scheduled completion date of the end of 2020. Our park is on track to be completed by spring of 2021. Phase two of infrastructure could be completed by mid-2021, dependent on funding. We have a goal of a first closing by fall of 2021, and private development will begin 30 days after the first closing. So you have a motion before you today that reflects the city manager's recommendation, and that is to approve the proposed terms that are contained in attachment A to the AIS, and to authorize the agency director to take all actions necessary to transfer the real property underlying the rights of way shown in attachment B to the city of Eugene. And with that, that concludes our presentation. I will stop sharing the screen and turn it over for discussion and questions.
Muted. Thank you very much, Mike. That was actually very helpful and clear presentation. I don't see any raised hands yet. Are there? Oh, there we go. Jennifer and then Chris.
Thanks, Mayor. So I know we discussed the affordable housing complex when we decided to add the flexibility of moving it from 10A to the block 3. And one of the reasons staff said it might be beneficial was because it might be able to be constructed earlier than if we left it in the 10A spot. So I'm wondering what the benefits of opening up the options of 1 and 2 would be, if there are other benefits besides that, because it seems like we're taking this affordable housing complex that was an important part and really a center point or center feature of this development, and if we move it to 1 or 2, we've now put it on the very edge of the development, not at all central, almost an afterthought of the development, that makes me a little uncomfortable. I know I've expressed this to staff. So like, why would I be interested in doing this? I guess I want you to.
It's a good question, and I can understand how that perception. I think that, I think every parcel that we've considered may have some pros and cons. I know 10A was attractive given its location and maybe proximity to the riverfront. It didn't quite have as easy a connection to transit, I would say, there. And it was right up against the railroad track. So there were some trade-offs there. And then with whether or not it's block 3 or 1 or 2, to be honest with you, we had a hard time seeing any advantages or disadvantages. That's why I wanted to reach out and actually talk to one of our local providers and say, what do you think, really? And so, and I shared with you what we heard was they're less concerned about the exact location around the riverfront, and we're more concerned about that it's big enough to do it and it's zoned properly. And so, even though 1 and 2 is a little bit further away, they're all within a stone's throw of the riverfront, so I'm not sure the experience for folks will be that much different. I think the big change is that we want to have the opportunity to work with our providers, and we think that could provide us a better path to actually moving forward with the project, depending on what their pipelines are. And we haven't dug into those conversations with them yet. We do know that there's interest there.
Okay, so I understand that they're geographically close to each other, but block 3 is obviously right on Fifth Avenue, which is that central street that's part of this development, which takes you right down to the park. So I think you can't argue that 1 and 2 are similar in that way, where they feel like they're connected to the development. And I think there was a strong community support for having an affordable housing complex central to this development, and it really fits with our values. So without hearing something better than, well, they're pretty much right next to each other, that seems like something I'm not interested in opening up unless there's a better reason than that, because that doesn't feel like a good enough reason to push this value all the way to the edge of the development. But I will say I really liked the chart that you guys made with each lot. That was very helpful. That really made me understand. The last thing, I don't know if I'm running out of time. Okay. The natural gas, you mentioned that putting it off until we had a citywide proposal or something. I don't know. It wasn't my intention to ever treat like that what we would do here would necessarily be what we'd want to do throughout the city. Like, I don't know that would be appropriate. This is we own this property unlike other properties throughout the city. So maybe I misunderstood what you're expecting there, but I don't think we're planning on treating like whatever rules we want here, we would want all over the city, because I don't think that would be thoughtful. But I do like the idea of taking more time, because I don't think we're there yet on what we want to do, if anything.
I just want to say, just to clarify, that option would allow you either path there, Jennifer, either to do something specific or to take that policy route.
Great, thanks for the clarification.
Counselor, I wanted to just make a comment, because I asked that same question about lots 1 and 2 that you asked, and actually pushed to keep 3 in the mix, so we would still have the flexibility to potentially put it on 3 if possible. One of the things I did hear is that, and this is not like to say that your reasoning is not correct, but I do think that lot 1 is probably the quietest site. It's farther from the viaduct. So there are some things that will come with that some people will probably see as pros as opposed to cons, but not probably enough to overrule your desire for them to be connected to Fifth Street. I totally understand that.
I appreciate that. I'm kind of hoping that some of my colleagues will have thoughts. So,
Sarah, can I add to that just for a second? Because there are some trade-offs, and the counselor, you've talked about those. I think one of the positives is really around what Williams and Dame might be able to do with lot 3 as a full block development and bringing forth more value and density. So if For example, if there's shared parking on that block and they share facilities, so we've talked about them sharing workout facilities, management offices, all of those, having one of those on that block to basically support maybe 2 or 3 different residential buildings, they can probably use that value to create more density on that block and bring more value on that block than they would if there was an affordable housing project kind of collated, because the affordable housing is going to be probably less dense. It's not going to be 200 units. It's probably going to be 75 units. And if you remember lots 1 and 2, there were some concerns about it abutting that residential or historic area. And 1 and 2 calls for kind of a less dense form of development, which the affordable housing will likely be. So it might be a good match to get more value on block 3 and move the affordable housing to 1 or 2, where it maybe meshes more with the historic neighborhood and so forth. So that was Williams and Dame's thought about it. It's not perfect, and there's some trade-offs for sure.
Oh, okay, Chris, and then Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a really helpful conversation, and I will say what I like is what I see as increased flexibility in the proposals. You have now been able to create a scale that we then have some flexibility within, but that flexibility doesn't detract from what our master concept was. So I'm comfortable that I think we're still working towards what it is we ultimately wanted to achieve, and we got some flexibility. Adding another floor or 2 to any one of the buildings to me is not a problem. It increases the number of people who are using that site, who have access there. So that's fine. How we've reconfigured some of the things is okay. And actually, having been involved in looking at the applications for affordable housing projects, Stellar Apartments and Willackenzie Village and Bascom Village, they tend to not be big, tall structures. They tend to want to be a little bit more lower impact, lower density. And so actually, in a way, I'm intrigued by the notion of putting them in more of the 1 and 2 location, because you might be able to get a much more attractive, lower density, more compatible to the neighborhood kind of design than trying to build in 3C or 3B some big, tall building. I see affordable housing boxes, and they're not nearly as nice as a Bascom Village kind of thing or a Stellar Apartments kind of thing. So it would be okay with me if you wanted to say 3C, 3B, we would prefer if you build it there, but I don't have any concern that 1 or 2 couldn't be great, lower density, more compatible, perfectly great affordable housing projects that literally they're within a couple of 300 feet of each other. So you're not talking about a whole nother part of town. It's just a subtle difference, but I'm fine either way, but I don't want to discourage it for that reason. The other thing is I think we should approve these conditions that are currently before us, because I really like them. And I think you've done a really good job of kind of coming up with the best of both worlds. And I think the natural gas conversation, as Jennifer said, needs more time. I think it's 2 separate conversations, at least right now. And these conditions we have before us are not dependent on the natural gas conversation. So we ought to go ahead and get these out of the way, and then we can have the natural gas conversation if we want to.
Okay, Mike, and then Claire.
Hi, Mike. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for the report. Chris has just alluded to something, and I want to test that out with a couple of questions. You're suggesting with this proposal that we ask Williams and Dame to make a commitment prior to us knowing what we're going to do with relation to regulating natural gas. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I follow your question again. Could you state that again?
The proposal is for us to put that in front of Williams and Dame and make and try and come to an agreement. Correct?
Yes, that
development agreement.
Yes, that this would become a conditions of closing in the terms.
So again, we're going to propose to them that they commit to us prior to knowing what we may do with regards to regulation of natural gas.
There would
Is
be
that
some
correct?
there would be some uncertainty as to, yes, the outcome of that condition.
Does that mean we're going to ask them for a commitment? I'm trying to ask this as delicately as I can, brother.
Well,
I
I
think-
get, Denny may have to help me out here. I guess if they understand that that there may be a term related to natural gas, so whatever outcome was the result of that, then they would be obligated to abide by that if they wanted to move forward with the development.
So let me try to take a shot at this. The last development agreement, the current one, I guess, and in every other development agreement that we signed has had contingencies that have to be met before closing. And so this updated development agreement will have contingencies such as, getting through the BOLI determination,
Right.
MUPTI approval, if they're going to pursue the MUPTI applications before they close. So their commitment would be only
Not until close.
not
right.
till closing. And so
Right.
they will want to know what those terms look like if we're talking about natural gas before they close. So yes, they're committed, but only to the extent that all of those contingencies are met,
Right.
one of which would
So
be we reach
technically, in the manner in which I intend the question, the answer is no, because we're not going to close prior to them knowing, right? They're going to know what we're going to do before they agree to close. Wouldn't that be true?
That's correct.
My understanding that they're not going to move forward unless we can have access to natural gas on the project. That's my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. So I think this is an issue that we would be better to deal with publicly and as clearly as we can upfront rather than to draw it out. I think we don't want to give people the false impression that this is not an important decision. And I would ask, as an addition, how do the folks developing the steam plant feel about natural gas not being available? Would either one of you answer that for me, please?
They have concerns about the impacts to their program there and their vision there.
Okay, so I recognize the desire amongst several in our community, and including some of my colleagues at the table, for us to do some limits here. But in reality, I think we're going to end up hurting our own project badly, if not canceling or postponing it, unless we deal with this sooner rather than later and have the conversation, even if it's hard. My sense is that we will likely endanger the development if we're not a little clearer sooner. So I hope we will. Thank you.
Okay, Claire, and then Alan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. So I support the proposed terms, the revised terms. And I actually like the way we're recouping costs for the infrastructure better than the way we were going to do it originally by creating a local improvement district. It seems to me a lot more straightforward and reduces administrative costs associated with managing a lid. So, and I'm okay with the flexibility on the location for the affordable housing, though I appreciate Jennifer's comments. I guess what I would like to know is, in terms of, the look of the building and the materials, is that affordable housing development going to be tied in terms of its look and how it's developed with all the other buildings in the development?
That's a good question. Yes, the affordable housing project would be subject to the design guidelines for the riverfront. So it would have to have a certain same kind of feel and level of quality to it as the other development.
So even if it's located on the edge next to a set of townhomes, it will feel connected with the whole development because of that?
Yes, that's the intent. Yes.
Okay. And then I guess I will take a little bit of issue with Michael with how you framed the around the idea of natural gas and regulating that differently. We have not had a policy discussion about that at this council. We've had advocates advocate for certain actions on our part. We've had some counselors express opinions about that, but this council has not engaged in any kind of policy discussion on that topic. And I think we should. I think we need to. I think Mike's asking exactly the kinds of questions that we would want to vet during such a process. I, have a lot of sympathy for the idea of, not increasing new natural gas development in our community, but I also have real concerns about having worked with this developer for several years now to change the game on them at the last minute. So that would come into my consideration. So I don't think we should have that policy discussion tonight, but I would like to ask the city manager to set us up to do that soon. I think Mike makes really excellent points about the timing question.
So while we're on that subject, I just want to point out, we've been sort of adjusting the way we do our AISs to include a motion for all of the options, but not all of them are hitting. We're still in the growth stage, so this one doesn't have one for every option. And I just wanted to point out that the motion that's in there, that's my recommendation, doesn't include the natural gas piece because you haven't had that policy discussion. But the second option does include that, so it would be easy to amend it if the majority wants to do that piece. But that's why it's not in there. So noted.
No, I personally do not have a desire to do that. I think we should, take your recommended motion and pass it, and then as a separate item, have this discussion about further regulation of natural gas. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Zelenka, and then Alan, and then Betty.
Thanks. Sorry for being late. I got caught up on a work thing, putting in the last minute grant for a bunch of money, so it was important. But I did hear the presentation as I was in transit. So I only missed the very beginning of it. Just walking through the items as they are in the AIS. Jennifer, you hit the nail on the head, to say it more bluntly. Moving the affordable housing to the outskirts of this development increases William Dane's development or the developer's value to this project. Having an affordable housing smack dab in the middle of these other things makes it tougher to do and has less value to them. So it's really a value proposition, and moving it over there allows them to maximize their value and their profits. So that I'm not real sanguine about that, but I'm not going to stand in the way of it. I sent out an email earlier, and excuse me if you already addressed this, but how does MUPD silent in all of these terms? I know Williams & Dames asked for a MUPD, so how does that work if they do it or if they sell it for the affordable housing part?
So the MUPD ordinance allows the moderate income contribution to be met by providing units or paying a fee. And it also allows for those units to be located either in the MUPD project or anywhere in a master planned area like the Riverfront. So whether or not it was Williams & Dame or another affordable housing provider wouldn't impact the eligibility of a MUPD project there. And so the units can be developed by the owner or by somebody else, so long as the units are substantially under construction by the time the fee is due or would be due.
Yeah, so we're still operating under that provision that I voted against, which the OB property finally relented on because of the atmospherics around it and just the way it looked and just the basic fairness of it. They have nothing to do with this project, but they're reaping the benefit of having it be within proximity of the project. Just because we drew the boundary that way doesn't mean that they should get the value. So I still have a problem with that when we get to the MUPD parts, but I understand how that's going to go too. As far as the price is concerned, how is it that, so the price and infrastructure, we do get our money back, what we paid, But when we get it and how we get it is in a different way. When we were with Williams and Dames, it was one group, thing moving forward. And so this has a completely different feel to it. I have not as much confidence in it anymore as I did. So if they don't move forward, then selling these lots one by one, potentially to multiple partners and negotiating deals and all this kind of stuff might take a long time for this to ever come across. So one of the things that I'm concerned about is how do you determine what the cost is? Is that clear? I've run into that many times as a negotiator of contracts and writing contracts where people thought cost meant this thing and other people thought it meant that. If it's not explicit, all the different elements to it, it could be problematic down the road.
Which costs were you referring to?
So the cost of the infrastructure.
So are you asking how do we get clear on what their share of the cost of the infrastructure is, or?
No, they got to pay for it all. It's what's the definition of the cost? What's included? Does it include staff time? Does it include all the things that have occurred up to date, or does it include just the materials, or?
I believe it includes all the soft and the hard costs of building out the infrastructure in the riverfront.
That's correct. And it's basically the same way we approach the LID value. So all of the design costs and hard costs we're going to be all part of that LID value. So basically that just gets flipped into the purchase price. So the number really shouldn't change at all from the estimated cost of the infrastructure and the LID versus the cost in this scenario. So it should be the same.
Including all the development and planning costs and staff costs.
And we've already agreed to that cost with Williams and Dames, so we already know generally what those are. So they're not going to change.
Generally agreed to. Okay.
We know what the cost of infrastructure is because we've already gone out to bid, so we know what that number is. We know the design costs. We know the bid.
Right. That's the contract cost. There's a whole slew of other costs associated with doing that project. Are those included?
Yes, we already know what those are because we've already incurred those. We've already done the design. We've already cleared the site and leveled it and all of those things. And those were part of the LID as well.
Good,
right.
correct
And part
answer.
and part of the more detailed DDA that we've already had in place.
Yes.
On the end of the round, Mayor.
Okay, I have Betty and then Emily, and then we'll do round two.
Thank you.
Betty, pull your microphone down.
Where is that thing?
It's right over your ear. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Does that do it?
Yep, it does it.
Okay. I was going to say something really important that I agree with Mike, but for different reasons. I agree with the part where he said that we should be in the open about what we're going to do about gas and do it before we go any further. I totally agree with that. However, I'm sure we don't agree. I think we should ban gas expansion. I know it's a big deal. It's not as big a deal as making everybody stay home for months. It's not as difficult as that. But I think that I don't approve of doing this motion when we haven't decided what we're going to do about gas expansion. This is an important part of the climate recovery. I am very concerned too that we're automatically approving the multiple unit property tax exemption if we pass the motion. And I think that should be separate. I see people saying no, but that's the way I read it. And I agree with Jennifer that putting this subsidized housing on the edge is not the same as putting it in the middle. I have been an advocate of inclusionary zoning for a long time, and anyone who gets the tax exemption will try to avoid including the low-income people with the other people. And I think it should be included. I'm very concerned about passing the motion as it is. at this time. And I do think we need to decide what we're going to do about gas. I know the steam plant wants it. I like the steam plant, and I know that lots of people want it. Lots of people want, I know friends who, and they're counselors too, who like natural gas, but it may be time to stop the expansion for environmental reasons, for the future of the planet. We talk a lot about people dying from the COVID-19, but maybe maybe life on Earth will die if we don't do something about climate, about global warming. And I have a question about the LID. Does that mean the individual, I see my time's going way quickly. Does that mean the individual property owner pays for the sidewalk in front of the house and the road? So people, that may be a deterrent to people buying property in this area. Thank you.
So, Councilor Taylor, I just want to clarify on the motion that's in the AIS does not address the natural gas issue at all. We just wanted to put it out there for discussion today because there was some interest in the past. So that today's motion on the in the AIS does not commit you either way to dealing with natural gas, and neither does it deal with the MUPTI issue either. So I wanted to make sure there wasn't confusion about that.
I know it's not in the motion, but if we're going to do it, if the completion of the agreement depends on that, we need to do it now. And that's why I say we're precluding the banning if we go ahead, whether it's in the motion or not. Thank you.
Okay, Emily and then Greg.
Thank you. I also don't like the idea of the affordable housing being pushed out to the edge, even if it is quieter there. I think that's a big concern. We've decided to build the first half of the infrastructure. Doesn't the gas have to go in while we're building the road?
Yeah, we've talked about this a couple of times when we've talked about the infrastructure project and said that, we do put all of that infrastructure in. So without any sort of council direction, we wouldn't, that's already in the plans. I think Matt could speak to that more clearly.
So we're already gonna put gas in the road that we're gonna start building.
There'll be infrastructure there, and I'm still gonna let Matt jump in if he's allowed to be raised to a panelist level here. But it doesn't mean that it can be, tapped into and brought into the buildings at some future gate. But we would probably put those lines in anyway, because there's going to be other dual purpose beyond that development. So I just think it would just be not our normal practice not to do it, but it doesn't mean that the individual lots have service.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Matt Rodriguez, Public Works Director, AIC. I just wanted to basically reinforce that. So when we have a street project, we have our own utilities like water and wastewater lines that we physically install. And then we have utility partners that come in like eWeb, Northwest Natural Gas, Comcast, and others. Natural gas is basically, whether natural gas goes in or not is a conversation between Northwest Natural and what they think could happen with the development. So at this point, yes, natural gas is planned to go in the street infrastructure. It's no cost to the city for that to happen. It'll go in a joint trench with the other utilities, so it's fairly efficient to put in. But as I think Sarah said, the ultimate decision on whether the buildings are served by natural gas is part of the conversation that you're talking about having.
So our question now is not just whether we're going to have pipes down the street, but whether or not Williams and Dame would be allowed to get from the pipe to their building. We're deciding that now, if we decide now.
No, what we're asked, so the way that the motion reads now is basically the proposed terms, right? And the proposed terms that are in attachment A on page 5 don't address the natural gas item. But if you look at option 2 in the AIS, option 2 in the AIS says, approve the proposed terms contained in attachment A to the AIS, including the condition of closing related to natural gas. And I think what we were talking about is that we wouldn't close on any of the properties until council had given some policy direction around what you wanted to do with natural gas. So it basically highlights to the developer, hey, this issue is out there, you know it's out there. It allows you to know that we you know, if the majority of the council says, hey, we don't want you to move forward until we really make a decision about this, that's what you could add into the motion. The motion as it is now just implements this under our current policy, which is in our current franchise agreement.
I understand the motion that's presented right now, but I'm hearing a lot of people want to include something about gas, and I'm trying to be really clear about what we're deciding. And if we have to make Williams and Dame wait until we've decided a gas policy for the whole city, that could take quite a while, and we can't close until we do. So how long of a time might we be holding the project back?
Denny or Michael, do you want to speak to that? Because you've been talking with them more specifically.
Yeah, they're not expected to close until next year. So we have time, I think is the answer. There'll be some uncertainty. They'll be due, if I were Williams and Damon, I think their desire probably is to have this be one of the contingencies that need to be satisfied as part of their due diligence. And, you know, they still have a little bit of environmental work to do and whatever, just to finish their due diligence. So we expect them to be done by the end of this calendar year with their due diligence, you know, all their due diligence work. So ideally, if that deal point got settled by the end of this calendar year, I think that would be to everyone's benefit.
Because my understanding is that the way they've designed the building so far, they need natural gas, and they're planning on keeping it that way, not designing in alternatives for electricity. Is that correct?
At this point, yes, I think there's, I think if I have the number right, they expect about 25 to 30% of their buildings to be powered by natural gas, and then the rest of it would be electric. And the major use of natural gas is hot water heating. They'd use electric for heating and cooling, and gas would be hot water heating and stovetops and those kinds of smaller things.
Well, it seems to me that gas is pretty important for them to be going forward, and I'm concerned about slowing things down. So we would be, all these other things have to be figured out also, but then at the end, we might have gas or not. And I'm not, it seems to me that they might bail at that point. I want us to stop using gas too, but I'm also wondering that with our franchise negotiations, there's a, you know, is that one of the possibilities that we can do? My understanding is that negotiations are not finished, and it's a negotiation, so we might not be able to get our ideal position.
Okay, I have Greg, and then we'll start a second round with Alan and Mike.
Thanks, Mayor. You know, I too have the same kind of concerns around, you know, natural gas versus, you know, electric or, you know, another form of power. But I do agree with Claire. We have not had this policy conversation. And, you know, we need to have this, you know, sometime in the near future. But, you know, I do also understand that a lot of this development could not really go forward as it has been planned without natural gas. So how many years have we spent working on this? What is it, 20? Michael, do you know? Do you remember?
You mean on the riverfront?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's probably about right.
At least 20.
How much money do we have in it now?
Well,
Over that period of time?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've either invested or committed to the 20 to 30 million dollar number.
Well, I don't think we could walk away from this. I think that we need to move this forward. I would like to see if we can work with Williams and Dane and Northwest Natural to have some goals around carbon neutrality. My understanding is that Northwest Natural is starting to shift its focus and is moving to develop cleaner energy sources. But if we had a goal that we could all agree on, that at some point, we would be able to integrate a new technology or change over, so that we could remain carbon neutral in development. I would be supportive of that. But sans that, I think we have to move forward. There's too much invested in it, and it's going to be a significant economic development driver as we are trying to move forward with this economic crisis that we have. Those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you. I have four counselors signed up for a second round, but I'm just going to jump in for a minute and kind of circle around this natural gas question. I mean, the reason it came to the table is we wanted to be thoughtful about it because you have a climate recovery ordinance and you're committed to that. And just a reminder that you're also in the process of and will be reviewing a climate action plan 2.0, which also addresses these things. And that ad hoc committee is kind of looking at where we get the best bang for the buck. Your staff is looking at that, where the greatest impact. So I am sort of seconding those of you who are suggesting we really just need a work session, because that information is data driven. It's based on a lot of insight, and you can have a pretty thoughtful response around how you look at this riverfront development, because all of that other work is being done about your climate work. So I would also encourage you not to feel like you have to jump quickly and make some decision here. You have this ongoing work concurrently that will help contribute to a thoughtful discussion, and be just great to have that work session. Okay, that said, we've got Alan, then Mike, then Chris.
So first of all, it is not true that this proposal can't go forward without natural gas. That's just blatantly incorrect. Might be what William Dane wants to do, but all of the recent other major buildings that have been built around here are not all have natural gas in them. So maybe this should be a data-driven conversation instead of speculation in terms of opinion about what Williams Dane wants versus what's actually been doing. There are many other buildings in Eugene that have been built on similar scale, if not bigger, that don't have gas. So maybe staff could get some comparisons for us, please, so that we could have a conversation about that. So Williams Dames isn't moving on this anytime soon. And if they do it all in the next year, that would surprise me. More likely we'll have this issue resolved about natural gas than before they are going to close. So with the Northwest Natural negotiations going on and probably the rest of this year, that would be in time for their closing and the CAP 2.0 stuff that's happening. So right now, like, attachment A, which is the proposed motion, doesn't have anything in about the gas. So you'd have to add in, if you're going to make a motion, the language at the bottom of page 2 of our AIS about the prohibits closing for A or B. And so the other thing about the natural gas is that most of the jurisdictions that have prohibited natural gas haven't done outright bans. What they've done is they prohibited space heating and gas heating predominantly, and allowed stoves and fireplaces to go forward. But it's because that's the huge part of the use that creates the greenhouse gases is in the space and water heating. So, and this is going to be a 50-year decision. So a lot of the folks are building properties based on current cost of natural gas, which may not be in the long term the lowest priced option. It is now. Capital costs aren't that much different than electric. So there are technologies that get you there. So that's just a preference more than a must-have as far as I'm concerned. On the attachment A, there's existing SDC credits. Can you explain that a little bit more? I didn't understand what that meant.
I'll take a shot at that. There's SDC credits available based on what was on the site historically. And so they'll be split between the various property owners. Williams and Dame would get their share, a prorated share of the SDC credits. There's the park, there's the Steve plant. So they'll all be prorated based on kind of usable square footage.
How much is that? The credits.
Matt, do you know that answer?
Is that like for the old Midley's building and stuff like that?
Yes.
So it's just that one little development corner. The rest of it wasn't developed.
This is Matt. Danny, I don't have that information on hand.
I feel like my number might be wrong, but I would point out that's in our current terms. So that's something that we've talked about and you guys have voted on.
Yeah, that has
maybe us two tonight.
Exactly.
Yeah, but we're proposing new terms. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, it's probably just the Midley's building, that little development, which isn't a lot compared to the whole property. Repurchase right. Agency has a right to repurchase WDA parcels if WH fails to start construction on any of those parcels within mutually agreeable periods of time. What does that mean? And what's the mutually agreeable period of time?
Yeah, we already have an outline of that we've worked together with them. You know, we've done a few variations as the project has kind of matured over time, but it varies from lot to lot. So, you know, for example, if they wanted to start on block 3, you know, there's a trigger that would basically require them to start basically immediately after closing. So our goal would be that the first product starts immediately after closing. And then there's a kind of a time sequence of say 12 to 18 months that we would want to see the second project and the next project follows. And what we tried to do is capture the parcels that we are kind of most interested in developing first, thinking about buildings that are support the plaza and the park and the 5th Avenue extension. So focusing on 3A and 7 and 9, those parcels are kind of our approach. And so our hope would be that those move forward quicker than maybe 1 and 2 or some of the other ones, 9, for example. But in any case, it's kind of like a stage development where we want them to be kind of on a continuous pattern of building. So before as one product is being completed, the next one. So that's how the timing is.
There's sure a heck of a lot of details that we haven't seen about this. This is just a sketch of the terms. Thanks.
Okay, Mike, then Claire, then Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to say, Betty, thank you for the agreement, even in its minor fashion there. But I'd caution you and say that if you want to ban grass in Eugene, you're going to open up a can of worms and a whole series of problems you may not want. I want to ask Matt again. Did I hear you correctly to say that it costs the city nothing to simply put the pipes in the ground for gas?
So Councilor Clark, it's an investment by the provider.
Right. So city's not paying for anything at all to put the pipes in the ground. That doesn't guarantee or say or commit that we're going to actually see them used. It's just
correct.
When is the smart time to put them in? When they cost us nothing, or conversely, if we decided later in a hypothetical situation here that nobody was willing to develop this property without gas, and we had to dig up the streets and put them in after the fact, what would that cost? Millions?
It's probably not too far off, yeah, with the surface work.
So it's smart to put
But
them
not
in
city cost.
now before we know how and when and where and why we'll use them, and whether or not we will, because everybody's been right, Claire and Greg, we haven't had that policy discussion yet. So it's smart to do that now while it costs nothing, so that later we don't have to pay millions just in case we find ourselves in a bad place without them. For that reason, I'll support the motion as it is, because I think it's the wise thing where we're not wasting taxpayers' money. Thanks.
Okay, Claire.
Thank you. So all this talk of putting in infrastructure and doing it ahead of time makes me wonder if there is an opportunity to connect this development to our high-speed fiber network.
Yes.
And are we developing a plan to do that?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated. The way we did it in the downtown core was easier because we were able to co-locate with within the existing electrical conduit. I think as you move towards the river, without having all of that conduit underground and so forth, it's a little bit more complicated. So we have been talking about the extension to the riverfront for sure.
Because that's great. I think it's super important. And, you know, giving up some natural gas, gaining high-speed internet, you know, there could be a trade-off in terms of the attractiveness of the development. And I just have to say, there is always an uncertainty for business about the fact that government might impose some regulation on them that doesn't exist now. So I think that's just a matter of fact for a developer like William and Dame, and they're just going to have to decide how to deal with the potential changes in regulation we may or may not impose. And they will, you know, I think Alan's right. I think there's enough lead time that we can develop our policy before they're going to want to close on this, but they could always hold off while they wait for us to have this discussion. And I don't think we need to attach it to the motion today. And also, you know, I'll just put out there that if they are willing to limit their use of natural gas on the development to, you know, no more than 30%, you know, that's a positive move. It's not an outright ban, but it is a significant reduction in usage of what they might propose for a site like this. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, Chris.
Thanks. My best outcome for the meeting tonight was we at least reached some kind of a decision, just an incremental progress. And so I don't want to say in any way, shape, or form that we shouldn't have the conversation about natural gas. We shouldn't have the conversation about affordable housing. We shouldn't have the conversation about, you know, some of the other topics, MUPD, but none of those are in attachment A. And so if we could just approve attachment A, that doesn't preclude in any way our ability to talk about natural gas, to talk about affordable housing, to talk about MUPD. Those conversations can all still take place. And I agree with Mike, the gas conversation should probably occur sooner rather than later, because we do need to provide as much clarity and certainty as we can. But that doesn't get in the way of approving these conditions tonight, because they're not that, what's the word? They're not that bad. I think they're perfectly reasonable. And what we've had in attachment A, we can do. We can get that done tonight and then still have the rest of the conversations. But I'd hate to end tonight not being able to reach any decision at all, because we have all these sideline conversations that are not related to attachment A.
Great. Okay, I think, Emily, we're probably ready to put a motion on the table.
I move to approve the proposed terms that are contained in attachment A to the AIS, and to authorize the agency director to take all actions necessary to transfer the real property underlying the rights of way shown in attachment B to the city of Eugene.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hands real hands or virtual hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 2. All right, that passes. Thank you very much. That was a really great presentation and a really good discussion. We have 20 minutes left. I'm happy to let everybody go early. I just wanted to offer you the opportunity. There's a resolution for a vote at the end of the 7:30 meeting, and that it could be a long night. So I was just going to offer you the opportunity, if anyone needed a clarification or information about that resolution, you could spend a few minutes now talking about it. We would still vote after the public forum. So I don't know if Jennifer, did you want to say anything about that? Did anyone feel they needed clarification on that? Mike, go for it. And Greg.
There was just one piece of it that made me uncomfortable. It seemed like a shot at the president. And I want to just make sure that that's not what that was. That this was really about the fact that there are, and I know several who are friends of mine who've experienced some really ugly stuff that really ought to stop yesterday over this. Asian Americans that are our friends and our community members that shouldn't have to deal with anything like this. And it's ugly and it's wrong. But the part about blame was interesting to me, and making the clear distinction. We do know what country this came from, and that's been part of the conversation. I just wanted to make sure we weren't throwing that all into one big bucket with this.
Can you tell me, Mike, which letter?
The first part in A, where it talks about blame.
Because that was not my intention to be calling out any individual.
That's all I was looking for. That's all I'm looking for. Thank you very much.
Okay, Greg.
Yeah, I originally proposed this resolution, and Jennifer was gracious enough to add some things into it and edit it to make it a stronger resolution. I think that we need to continue to express our values around the issues of discrimination in this community, because they do exist. And I know of at least 2 people that I've talked to who have, felt, threatened in this atmosphere, who both are Asian, by people who have said some very unkind things, to them out of a car window walking down the street. I just think we need to communicate to the community clearly that this is where this council stands, where this city stands, that we stand against this, and be firm in that and resolute. We're not going back. We're going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank both Greg and Jennifer for bringing this before us. And I do think it's a very important statement, and very important to make it at this time because we are seeing an increase in bias and hatred directed at all kinds of people, including Asian and Pacific Islanders. And we need to stand for that. So thank you for bringing it forward. And if there are no other comments or business, we are adjourned until 7:30. Thank you all.